So welcome everyone to Cerulean Arts and our 2x2 exhibition 2021. This is the third year of the 2x2 where we invite a select group of artists to exhibit four pieces identical in size, and we display them 2x2. So it gives each artist a kind of a highlight and a nice way to end the year and the season. So this year's artists are Erin Castellan, Alexander Cheves, Chris Fierro, R.A. Friedman, Gary Grissom, Rosae Reeder, Tony Rosati, Carrie Sacco, Ryan Ward, and Martha Wirkijowski. What we'll do is we're going to tour around the exhibition space and stop at each artist, and then each will give a little bit about themselves and about their work. So we'll get started with Gary Grissom. Hey, Gary.
Hi.
So we've got four of your paintings here.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your work? And
Right. Well, I'm fairly old, so I started out doing color field painting about 1970. Then I needed employment, and I ended up working as a designer with really good photographers, and I picked up photography. And for about 20 years, I exhibited photography and have had fellowships in photography. Went back to, always painted, but went back to painting probably about the year 2000. My interest shifted. And landscape is one of the things. I'm doing everything my teachers told me not to do. I was told never to do figurative painting. We were told to do things 40 inches and larger. So, and I'm beginning to think small paintings are good. When I had this opportunity, my first had a stupid idea. I was going to have 4 different types of painting. But then I decided to use the landscape as the painting I would exhibit. You know.
so what is it about landscape that interests
Well, first of all, yeah. In the beginning of my attraction to landscape, it was probably the closest to non-objective painting, which I grew up with. But I've also traveled a lot. I've done a lot of photography in places like Central America. So I've been in the landscape. Traveling with archaeologists in the rainforest. So I've done a lot of photography in nature. I have a degree in science before I went to art school. And I always had an interest in biology and nature. So that's attraction. These 4 paintings are really from my neighborhood. I live in Philadelphia, but I live near Morris Park, which is part of the Fairmont system, near City Line Avenue. And I've spent a lot of time up there looking at both drawing and doing photography.
How do you put these together? Are they from photograph or observation or both?
Both. I don't have any. I wish I had it. I wish I did things the same way consistently. I don't. So it's both. Yeah. I think I have a grandkid coming in. Sorry about that. My baby said, "Here, come look at paintings." My painting. It should be okay. Go in the swimming pool.
Hope that's not because she saw some of your paintings.
No, she's reading quite a lot. And does a lot of her own drawings.
So are these oil?
Yeah. I painted in acrylic in the 70s, then went back to oil painting. I really like oil paint.
So is that what you're focused on these days, is oil painting?
I again have a lack of discipline. I'm all over the place. I actually trying to do drawings. I think I don't draw enough, so I've been working with graphite and pastel and trying to mix ink in with the drawing. But basically, all paint is what I enjoy the most.
Well, looks great. Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you.
So next up is Tony Rosati. Hello, Tony.
Yeah, hi. I unmuted. I had trouble unmuting before. It's because I was in a Zoom class with UArts. I had to switch to the path Zoom to make it work, but I'm here now.
Great. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that we
Sure.
are seeing?
Sure. Yeah, you can, the four of them. Well, I've been teaching at UArts and the Academy for quite a while. I first started teaching at UArts in 1980 and then at the Academy in 1985, where I chaired the printmaking department for a long, long time until recently. My mediums of choice are, I mean, I'm a printmaker. Went to Tyler MFA program for printmaking, mostly etching, but then there came a time where I was doing monotypes. But even before that, I did more watercolors than anything for most of my life. But I've gravitated to monotypes, and these four prints they kind of go together, but they were not intended to go together. It just so happened that the title of this show gave me an opportunity to bring them together. And I've kind of hung on to them for a number of years. I think one or two of them have been exhibited before, but not all of them. But as I think most of you know, monotype can be a form of painting, a painting that's printed. I tell my students that a simplistic definition of monotype would be a printed painting. Painting on any flat surface, including the kitchen table, and putting paper over it and transferring by way of rubbing the painting from the table surface to the paper. But of course, in the print shop, we do the paintings or rolling of ink on a plate and then run it through a press to transfer it to paper. But the four of these, Mike, if we could look at them as a group just for a moment, came about over a period of time, probably in a decade span of time. And I was surprised when I put them together that they seemed to look like they were done near one another in time. But there were two of them that came off the press and didn't need anything done to them. And that would be the lower left one called Polar Mill, which actually was a demonstration print in the context of a course I teach at the Academy in monotype. And every so often a demo print just does what you like it to do and you use it. The other one that turned out just the way, well, it did change in the printing is the upper right one. It's called Pine Barrens. Some things didn't print there. There's a sort of orb of light in the middle to the right. It was kind of a bush that would have printed in a much lusher dark green, and it didn't. And I was at first disappointed in it. But that's the way of monotype. The way you paint it doesn't always transfer to the paper, but over time, there's a glow about it, and it became a focal point that I kind of became friends with, I'll put it that way. But the other two, the upper left and the lower right one, well, they didn't just happen. This one didn't print the way I wanted it to at all, and it got put in a drawer with such things. And the margins of the paper it was on I had gotten inky fingerprints on it and all. So it went dormant for a while. And then the lower right one, which is probably the more surreal one, that one really, that went dormant for about 10 years, really. It was one of the monotypes that most of what I painted didn't print, but there was something about it. And what I found intriguing about it was the figure, the white part of the figure, the head, and the kind of long bar looked like a horizontal exclamation point. And that kept intriguing me. And it took a long time of looking at it and putting it away. And I have a drawer full of such things, and I sometimes use pieces of one monotype and collage it onto another. So that particular one is called Ice Cream Dream, which plays with puns. I sometimes like incorporating a pun in the title. And ice cream sounds like ice cream. And then Ice Cream Dream, because it ended up having a bunch of eyes in the sky and was just an odd thing. And that's the way it got titled. So it took a long time to resolve that. And then the upper left one, I started painting on, and I was using iridescent medium. But the soiled margin, so I just tore off all the margins from the upper left one, which is called Last Melt, and then collaged it onto a sheet of gray paper so that the white paper the print was on became more luminous against the gray paper. So they were all aesthetic decisions. And then in the end, when I got them all together, I really never thought of myself as much as one who really had the intentions of making environmental statements with the artwork. But then that's the way this group ended up looking like and sounding like to me. Last Melt, I thought of as the last bunch of snow to melt at the end of a winter. And then the one under it is called Polar Melt. And these titles were independent and years apart. Polar Melt was one that I did think of the atmosphere causing the ice caps to melt. So that would be the only one that I really thought of in an environmental sense. And then Ice Cream Dream in this context is as though it's a surreal, bizarre dream with a figure kind of screaming, hovering in the air. And it seemed to be a comment on what's happening to our environment. All of them seemed to be that when they got put together. So, and the paintings are done within half an hour to an hour. And I've come to work in a very automatistic way with no preconceived notion of what the image will be. And still I just move paint around on the plate and things happen. And sometimes I just splatter it and things happen. And one thing suggests another and you make something be something. But I almost always do landscapes. I hardly ever put figures in my work. Way back, I did figurative work. And then I have episodes of doing snowmen in the landscape. The reason for doing that, I cannot explain, but I have a fascination with that, for whatever that's worth. Anyhow, I think that's about enough to say on that, unless anyone has any questions.
Tony, Susan Thomas here. How are you?
Oh, good, Susan. Good to see you.
It's nice to see you. I just wanted to ask what kind of paint you are using.
Yeah, well, I go anywhere from water-based paints to oil paints to a mix of oil paint and printing ink. And these are all a mix of oil paint for making oil painting and some printing ink. However, the upper left one, Last Melt, has watercolor on it. I often touch some of them up with watercolor afterwards. So the iridescent medium is a watercolor medium, Winsor Newton iridescent medium, and also there's a green field under the iridescent medium that wasn't rich enough in the way it printed. So I put a few layers of watercolor over it. So they often become mixed media. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is the Polar Melt mixed?
That has a little bit of printing ink in it, and I can't remember which is which. I think it's the sort of the foreground of it was rolled on ink, and actually the linear elements in the foreground, the kind of layers, the ripples that are coming forward. That's using. I often use the printmaking rollers as drawing tools. And you can use a roller to lay down a flat of ink by having the whole surface of the roller, like a tire, roll across the plate. But you can also lift it up so that one end of the roller is lifted off the plate. You just have the edge of the wheel on the other end. And by using the edge of the wheel and running it across the plate in a deliberate straight fashion or in a curvaceous fashion, imposes a line without trying to paint or draw a line. So those ripples in the foreground are all the edge of a roller being driven across the field of ink.
Great, very interesting.
So,
Thank you.
okay,
Thanks, Tony.
sure.
So next, we have Erin Castellan.
Hi, everyone. I'm an artist that works in painting and textile medium. So these 4 small pieces are all hand embroidered and beaded acrylic painting on jacquard woven fabric. So the fabric was woven many years ago when I studied textile design on a big industrial computerized loom. But I have just boxes and boxes of scraps that I save and have been trying to recycle and reuse materials and transform them into images my entire artistic life. So this past summer, I cut up some of those old fabrics and gessoed them and painted on them, and then did a lot of the beading and stitching. And all of my works, whether they're of this nature or of some of the more collage works that you might see on my website, I'm really thinking a lot about today's digital world where everything is so slick, like slick screens and flattened images. And so I really like to craft these images with a lot of texture and detail to celebrate the physical world, but also just looking and investigating all of the little tiny things of this physical world. So similar to how you might go for a walk in the woods and overturn rocks and look for fungi or just weird surprises of color and texture. My works are meant to slow people down, and the longer they look, the more surprises they will find, different connections across forms through different materials. And that is, the work in a nutshell, I guess. But, I do think, as well as just making the images, I think a lot about the process of textiles and how it really connects to the human. And so a viewer might get slowed down by looking at all of the textures and details and, counting the numerous stitches. But I think that people and viewers are also slowed down and drawn to just the intimacy of another human's touch. And, a lot of artwork is like that, painting and whatnot, but with textiles, because it's an accumulative process and you can count the beads or count the stitching, there is that measurable time that exists within the work. And I think that really combined with some of the used materials that I save and repurpose speak to this human sense and a changing world, less so than this slick manufactured digital world that we're getting more increasingly used to.
Would you want people to touch these? They seem like ready to be touched, Yeah,
it's tempting, but no. I've given artist talks before where I talk about touching with the eyes and seeing with the hands, and this kind of combining the painting and the textiles in and thinking a lot about the senses and how like a celebration of intimacy and how you can really if you become focused and slow down your pace of looking enough, you can start to almost feel with the visual sensation, or
well, they'd have to buy it first before we'd let
they have to they have to buy it first. My hands are all over it for months. There's a lot of labor put into these, but of course the oils of the skin do affect the fabrics and the threads, but yeah, they are nice to touch, but touch with the eyes in the gallery.
Yes. So you've moved somewhat recently. Have you found the move has affected your imagery or color palette or anything?
I moved out west. I'm here in Washington State a year and a half ago, and these particular pieces, I heard from Tina in this summer, right at the height of fire season. So I would say that these were kind of done around that time when we were having weeks of smoky air and ash was falling and you might not see the sky. And so some of the blue stripes, I would say, reference, you know, these little snippets of blue sky, or what I missed when I would look outside the window and it was just this big, thick cloud. And I think the sense of space in some of them has kind of that clotted, shallow space of the far horizon has been taken away in many of them. You're limited in that way. So in a sense, these four speak to that time. This particular piece is verdant and really dreaming of some of the lush green mosses and leaves of where I lived before in North Carolina, where we got so much rain. And then, you know, in the current place where I am, the extreme drought, and then other pieces are directly referencing like the smoke or the heat, like this one to the right here with sometimes when the sky would glow this weird orange and ash would fall. This particular piece on the lower right was thinking about the day that this one's titled My Blue Sky, and it was the day my blue sky was taken away because a fire about 12 miles from our town jumped a line, and the entire sky that was blue just filled with smoke, and you could see it coming really quickly. So yes, I would say a lot of this body of work directly references my current world, though right now we are in 6 inches of snow, and you know, winter is here, so it's different. But in the months that these were created, I was kind of hunkered down inside, unable to enjoy the outdoors as much as I usually love to do. So.
It's great. Thanks, Erin. They're beautiful.
Thank you.
So before we move to the next artist, I just wanted to mention that you can come to the gallery in person Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 6, Saturday, Sunday, 12 to 6. This exhibition is up through the 24th, but everything is also available on our website. So I put a link to the site in the chat for you so you can see things there as well. And our next artist is Chris Fierro. Hello, Chris.
Hello. First, I'd like to thank Tina and Michael for including me in this show. Just being at the opening last weekend, the show looked great, and I think it's a great concept for a show. So my work is all done from direct observation. It's interesting for me to just see a grouping of still lifes because I also paint and draw a lot of interiors, landscapes, cityscapes. But if I go back really all the way to undergrad, where I started working from observation, this was really how it started. And I just kind of kept doing these typically single forms or single grouping of objects, kept doing these all along. And for me, observation is a way to connect with the world around me, to connect with these particular objects and develop a relationship over the period of time of developing the paintings. I really don't even think of them as still lifes. I think of them more as almost portraits of objects. I've never been really interested in painting the kind of still life where, you know, the objects are there to create a larger composition. I certainly admire a lot of painters that do that, but for me, the connection has always been about, you know, me and this one object or grouping of objects. In terms of process, things start out very direct. I mean, usually with a palette knife. just really focusing on large color relationships. And then gradually over time, you know, things will get more resolved. My approach tends to be tonal. So I'm, you know, if you're thinking of the properties of color, I'm emphasizing that light and dark relationship first. And in terms of composition, again, just trying to create a balanced composition. And I think that tends to lead me towards these sort of square formats and also some of the circular formats that you see. I think that's about it as far as what I have to say about the work. Do people have any questions?
So
Can I ask about the silk flower?
Sure.
Is that meant to be sitting on the floor?
All of these are on a shelf.
A shelf. Oh,
Yep.
okay.
A shelf like just, you know, a bit below eye level. And
I
I'm
see.
really standing about 6 feet back.
So you said that you started with a palette knife,
Yes.
but it looks so smooth. Is that you using a palette knife throughout?
No, I would say the palette knife is more in the beginning, and it's really just to get me away from too much drawing at the beginning, get me to really force myself to put the color relationships above everything else. And then the painting will get scraped down, sanded down, you know, built, rebuilt. These usually take me a few months to paint. So, yeah, they go through a lot of different states.
Thank you. Thank you.
So your,
Very beautiful.
Thank you.
Chris, your palette gives them somewhat of a dreamy quality. Is that something you're looking for, or it just happens?
I would say it just happens. Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's the palette or if it's just the process that leaves a person with that sense. I mean, I've certainly had that response from a lot of people over the years, but it's not something I'm intentionally trying to create. I think it just comes out of the process.
I have a question.
Sure.
Well, actually, it's a couple of questions. When I've taken your painting classes, and when you're teaching the class, the first thing you want everybody to cover the canvas in 15 minutes. But do you do that all the time with your own paintings, or does it take more, like? I think there was a painting of the interior of your house with your staircase, and it's very detailed. I was wondering if you do that also with that, or is there a different process with that?
No, I started everything the same. I'm not sure that, well, definitely in a larger painting, I can't get it covered in 15 minutes. And the point when I say that in class, it's not so much that it happens in 15 minutes. It's that you're working to get the canvas covered in a really broad sense as quickly as you can. Because I think it's hard to see the big relationships within a painting or drawing when you have lots of areas that you haven't considered at all. So that's really, for me and for my teaching, that's the reason for wanting to keep things really broad in the beginning.
I guess it keeps you from obsessing on a particular thing and looking at the whole picture.
Yes. Yeah, so trying to make every decision in relation to the whole painting. And it's hard to do that when you have areas of the painting that you haven't even considered yet.
The second part question I had is, do you find it difficult to find time to paint and draw when you're also teaching full time?
No, I've always felt like the teaching feeds the work and vice versa. So, I mean, I certainly know people, and I've, you know, especially back in like grad school, had classmates that found that they just couldn't do both. Fortunately, you know, I feel like one is kind of fed the other, and vice versa. So I guess I'm pretty fortunate in that sense.
Thank you, Chris. So next up is Carrie Sacco. Hey, Carrie.
Sure, I'm unmuted. Hi, everyone. My name's Carrie Sacco. I am an oil painter currently living in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I have a little bit of history with Philadelphia. I grew up in the suburbs there. Michael and I met in lithography class at the academy. So my background is a printmaking background, but I also was a painter. But I completely got away from that when I graduated from Millersville University. And when I came to the academy to study plate lithography, I picked up oil painting again because I was kind of hanging out in Chester County, doing some plein air stuff. And I slowly just started shifting over to oil painting. And what I really like about it is the quality of the color and the way the paint handles and the luminosity. But what I have grown into is a painter who I think captures, and I think Tina might help me with this little tagline, like the essence of the subject matter. These are all places that I either live or walk and visit and hike and feel a really strong connection with the landscape. And I seek to kind of capture the quality of the light, the feel of the landscape. And I just have a really strong sense of color. I always have. I just kind of always took that for granted. And I've been doing a little bit more in-depth playing around with different palettes and everything like that. So mostly I was strictly trying to do plein air. For instance, this piece right here is a plein air study that I did in Maine in Union River Bay, just over the bridge from Acadia National Park. And I have to say, I've turned into a fair weather plein air painter. It got super cold that week that we rented and super windy. And I was like, I'm staying inside and painting from my little balcony window. But most of the time now, what I do is I have my camera or my cell phone with me, and I'm constantly walking. We have a couple dogs. I'm just out and about, and I stop and snap something, play around with the composition, and just go from there, whether I push the elements of the color saturation, really crop the composition to something that's like very catching or intriguing and really draws the viewer in. Those are the kind of things that I like to play around with. I did one plein air show last year. I used to do a lot more. And I really credit my plein air time with that ability to quickly get down the basic elements, the color, the composition, and to record what struck you first. What exactly are you looking at? And that's what always intrigues people who, you know, would stop by to see what you were painting. They're like, oh, I never looked at that old building before and the way you're painting it, or that kind of stuff. So that's what I really do love. But yeah, I've completely culled down my plein air show list, but that's okay. I just like, and what I do with this small format, I really love it. And I've seen a couple artists in this show do it really well, is float the paintings in the frames. And I think it allows the paintings to breathe and nestled in there. I think it's a really nice presentation with mine and a lot of the other people who have chosen that way to present. So
Carrie, are you strictly painting these days, or are you making any prints?
no, I'm strictly painting. I have been going through a lot of flat files and emptying out a house that I still own in Philadelphia, where I still have a lot of stuff stored. So I've been finding old textbooks and a lot of printmaking paper. So who knows if I'll step back into the printing field. But the thing I credit with my printmaking time was mark making and that graphic design element. A lot of my works were black and white, but I also got into doing transparent color washes or fields on my lithos. So I really tried to combine the landscape painting philosophy with building up layers of transparent color. So never say never, but I like, you know, the idea of monotypes. Tony has the right idea. I do outdoor shows a lot, so this small format works for me for creating a body of work that people can kind of pick up at an art show and not necessarily commit to a big painting. My larger works mostly are commission works. So I said, hit me up in January because December's crazy. But it was really nice, like, to get the prospectus for this show. I thought what I was going to do was do the only things I was able to do during the pandemic, which was walk around this beautiful trail system near where I live in Lancaster, but we would do one trip a year to Maine. And so I just really, I like the stones and the feeling of the landscape of Maine. And there's something about the energy and the connection with that, which I feel the same when I go to Ireland. And I thought, like, maybe at one time they probably were connected before the continents split apart. And it just is really, really special to me. And then the other diagonal, the trail painting and the misty farm scene are right here in Lancaster County. So I'm like always out, early morning, late afternoon. This time of year, I like to go on the trails at dusk because I can hear the owls out, and I kind of go try to track them.
Thanks, Carrie.
You're welcome.
So we're swinging the ship around to the other side of the gallery. And now we're at Rosae Reeder's work. Hello, Rosae.
Hi, everybody.
How are you?
I'm good. I went to the dentist today, so I might be a little swarthy with my speech, but I'll do my best.
We're glad you made it. So you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the work here?
Sure. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I am a book artist and a printmaker, and I use all different types of media to make my work. Printmaking media, photographic media, painting, and of course, book arts. I am faculty at the University of the Arts and at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. And currently I am the interim program director for the illustration program at UArts. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. About this work. Thank you again, Michael, for inviting me, Michael and Tina for inviting me to be in this show, because it really made me think about, you know, some next steps in some things that I really wanted to work on. And for the longest time, years and years, I have wanted to incorporate working with resin in my work. And many years ago, probably well over 10 years ago, I started experimenting with mold making and, you know, different things like that, because I wanted to make book covers that I could embed things in, and it was disastrous. I mean, like completely disastrous. Resin, you know, not that it's so much better today, it's better in a different way, which I will explain. But, you know, back then, most of the materials that you would find in resin were pretty much the industrial kinds of things, or they would come in these sets that you would have to, you know, work with. And, you know, I worked with a couple of friends, couple of colleagues. We made molds and we tried to make flat pieces so that they wouldn't get bubbles and things like that. But it wasn't doing exactly what I wanted it to do. So I said later, right? I said, I'll put this aside, do some other things, and maybe later on down the line, I'll be able to revisit it. And so probably for, I don't know, the last maybe 5 or 6 months, I've been experimenting with resin, you know, these days, which, you know, they sell these kind of, you know, pour your own resin, you know, like pens and pencils, or, you know, make a tray that you can keep makeup in, like that kind of thing. And the actual chemical makeup of the resin is the same, but it's more accessible. They make things like art resin now, and they make it so that people, artists, are able to make jewelry and things in small batches. It's not as, you know, you don't need as much ventilation, although I do wear protective gear and things like that. But so I've been experimenting, making other things, because eventually I want to bring it back to my art. So circling back, I've been doing that separately, kind of fooling around with the resin and figuring out how it works. And then I've always done works on paper. As a printmaker, you know, that's a thing that I've always done. And a book artist as well. I've always done works on paper. So I've been painting, and I have amassed all of these small works on paper, these small acrylic paintings, which is what this is. And in thinking about what I wanted to make for this show, I was reflecting on the last couple of months, really. Us coming out of the pandemic and us kind of entering back into, you know, quote unquote, normal life as we know it right now. And so I read a lot. I read every night before I go to bed. I have many favorite authors that I like, but one of which, my most favorite author, is Octavia Butler. And there's a book, a 2-series book that she wrote called Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. And I won't get into I won't get into deep about what the book is about, except to say that it's kind of like a post-apocalyptic story. And there's this young girl who finds her way, her whole family, she loses her whole family. And so she kind of becomes this new kind of messiah for the people. And it's about her story, about her life and the world as it is at that point. And so Octavia Butler, there's a quote from this book, from one of these books. And the full quote is, "All you touch, you change. All you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." And so that quote struck me. It stuck with me. It has stuck with me since I read those books, probably 10, 15 years ago. And I've always wanted to do something with that quote, not only as an homage to Octavia Butler, but because I think the words are important, and especially now they really speak to me, because of where we are in the world after the pandemic, where we're going, our interactions between one another. So what I did was I chose one of my paintings that I thought would be able to reflect the text that I was going to put over top of the painting the best. And when I paint in acrylic, I paint in the abstract, layering lots of colors, one on top of the other, usually very bright colors. It's not kind of showing up too well here, but this is, yellows and some pinks, like turquoise. And so the idea here was to take these small paintings and to float resin text over top of them, so that when you're standing away from the paintings, when you're standing far away, you kind of can see that something else is going on. And so it kind of pulls you up so that you can get to read all of the text at the same time. And I do this in my book work as well. I like there to be some sort of interaction with the viewer in that way. And one of the things that I really like about these pieces is that the resin sitting on top feels very fluid to me. And it also looks really strange, right? Like you kind of can't tell unless you know really what it is. You just don't know what it is. But I like what's happening underneath the resin with the painting, how you could see the color through. And I really appreciate what it looks like from far away. The last thing that's really interesting about these images is that, again, many years ago, I happened upon these frames because a friend of mine is a jeweler, and she bought these frames, these specific frames, to showcase her jewelry. And these are frames that you can hold 3-dimensional items in. So you could see that the paintings are kind of floated and the resin is kind of floated in the middle of the frame. But the piece that's holding on to the frame is kind of like this stretchy membrane. So if I wanted to, I could build up a surface on these paintings that, could hold an actual 3-dimensional object and put them in this frame. You could put like a baseball in these frames. That's how stretchy the membrane is to hold on to it. And so I thought that I wanted to use these not only because of the quality of the frame themselves, but because I thought that you would really be able to see, you know, the resin letters kind of stand out, and, you know, I wouldn't have to worry about kind of putting them behind glass or something like that. So that was kind of all over the place, but that's how I think, right? And that's how I happened upon this piece. I think it's, for me, just a commentary of, you know, me thinking about what's been going on for the last number of months, how I've been interacting with people in my life, and, you know, what I'm thinking about moving forward. So.
It's great. Thanks, Rosae.
Thank you.
So next up is Ryan Ward. Hello, Ryan.
Hello. So I'd also like to thank Tina and Michael for including me. This was a lot of fun to kind of see the work in a different light, and think about the relationships between each piece and so forth. So thank you, really appreciate it. And I am in Scranton, up here in northeastern PA, which I awkwardly mentioned at the outset tonight. And I curate / manage a contemporary art collection called the Maslow Collection, which is housed at Marywood University, and I teach when the schedule permits as well, drawing and painting. And I was at PAFA from 2012 to 2014, and really had an amazing time in Philadelphia and met amazing artists, and, you know, formed lifelong friendships. So about these 4 pieces, they span a couple years, maybe the last 3 or 4 years. So it's pretty evident, I think, that they kind of run from recognizable imagery to not so recognizable imagery, which is a little representative of how I work. I don't really set up too many distinctions in the studio, or get too stressed out about whether something's more on the figurative side or just purely abstract. And so that's reflected here with these 4. I also have a bit of a background with printmaking, or maybe background's too strong of a word to use. I've always had an interest in it, and have been fairly experimental with it over the years, and restless, you might say. I kind of I've never been into the whole kind of edition making with printmaking, and I more so print off of whatever kind of plate or material that's around, and then cut it up and collage with those elements and paint back in, draw back in. So that's pretty enjoyable for me, and that's showing up here with these pieces. Some of these, like this one that is being shown right now, started off as an etching with those. You can see the plate marks on some of those shapes, and then I went back in and actually there's a penny. I think I printed a penny in that one as well, with the Lincoln side up there, and then I drew back in and painted with acrylic back on top, and saw what happened thereafter. Same thing with the other figurative, well, they're all kind of figurative, but that one to the left there, top, that was also an etching that I adhered some plastic to the top of and drew back in with pencil. And they're all, the only one that's not sort of collage on top of, well, is not using the collage method or language is probably the bottom left one. That's more like mostly all acrylic. But as far as the content that's happening, you know, the top left is sort of like this guy that's kind of lassoing himself, you know, and getting himself in a tricky situation in that sense. And the one to the right is sort of some kind of deconstructed hat that also kind of resembles some kind of confused mental state. Bottom left is from it initially came from an Alexander Gardner photo of Lincoln's assassination conspirators being hung. And so, and there's all these people standing around watching and in front of and behind the gallows. And I played with that image a lot with a lot of different pieces. And this is like one iteration of that with these watchers, these onlookers in the foreground with funny hats and then some kind of, you know, you wouldn't get gallows out of that architecture in the middle ground there, but you know, that's sort of how it started and became maybe more innocuous than that and became furniture or chairs or whatever. And the one to the right of that is oil that I went back on top of with paper and ink and acrylic. And kind of as I went and tried to embrace surprises or new sources or elements in the studio, it kind of was maybe or resembled like well, actually I started off with handlebars and then I thought, oh, it's like a tongue that's like a tongue and a mouth that's flying around or twisted. It's like a tongue twister. And then I kind of went like with some, like a hint at some teeth there on the top and bottom, like you're inside of a mouth. So as you can tell, like, you know, I don't have some major common linear thread that runs through my work. Because I go with the unexpecteds, at least I try to in the studio that occur to kind of guide each piece, or I'll work on a whole bunch of pieces simultaneously and see what comes up and turn things towards the wall for like months or years at a time, and then go back in much later, try to get something out of like, you know, not so successful pieces. And but if I had to kind of like land on a theme recently, or yeah, like I said, common thread or threads, I have a show up in Pennsylvania, in Wilkes-Barre right now, this area where it has to do with like the Fool or the Clown, amusement parks, carnivals, circuses, and like using that as a kind of environment or metaphor for how we live and playing with that imagery. And so that's showing up a little bit with these pieces as well. So yeah, so hopefully I've touched on a couple items there on the construction side of these, the more visual, formal side, and then content and subject matter as well.
Ryan, your titles are very particular and descriptive. I mean, you reference Lincoln 2 times in these works. And can you speak about that a little bit? I mean, do they come first or after or in the middle? Or
definitely not first, but sometimes in the middle. you know, like as I'm working, I'll have some phrase running through my head, and then I'll jot it down, and then I'll manipulate it. But usually, a combination of middle and after, and I do just a lot of note taking, and you know, things I hear, colloquialisms, or just like whatever, more like a common language, and then I'll play with it and move it around. And you know, I a while ago I was never into the title thing. And then I realized like I do like to play with language, and so I was like, oh, it's kind of a missed opportunity, and so it just, now I have a lot of fun with it, but I do need them to operate on multiple levels. Like I don't want them to like, you know, shut down the work. I want them to open it up and have a multiplicity of meetings, so that, you know, I have certain criteria with them. But so, and puns, yeah, I don't really like grandiose sounding titles. So I'm more like punny things, or things you might hear every day, possibly. And
Can you tell us the title of this one?
Yeah, it's to lose one's drawers. Can you remind me? Do you have it there?
Yes, I have it. It's losing one's drawers, lassoing one's ass.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I was playing with drawer as a word in a lot of titles because it's drawer and it's reward backwards, and it's my name is that my last name is draw backwards, and anyway, there are a lot. So I was drawers and you know, literal dresser drawers or pants. So I have a couple pieces where like you're losing your drawers. That's not an ideal social situation. So this guy's like this character, I guess, is trying to like save his ass by like lassoing his drawers, like to pull them up, you know. So it's like that, I don't know, it's a little bit of that fool character. So, but the again, the Lincoln thing is like from Gardner, the Civil War photographer. His photographs are really amazing in my mind, and haunting, and I've looked at those things for a while, and the link, and
I mean, the title of this one is "The Site of the Execution of Lincoln's Conspirators is a Tennis Court."
Yeah, that is pretty specific. That's because that's a true statement. The armory, the military base where they hung these conspirators in DC, became a kind of public area or park, and so it's actual tennis court there. So that got me thinking about like the idea of the spectator, people standing around watching, in that case, a sporting event or this like major historical moment in US history, and like slamming those together in some of these pieces.
It's great. Thank you, Ryan.
Sure. Thank you.
So next, we have the work of Martha Wirkijowski. Martha had another commitment tonight and couldn't be with us, so she made us a video. Okay.
Hi, my name is Martha Wirkijowski, and I'm one of the featured artists at the 2x2 exhibition at Cerulean Arts. My intent is to create senses of excitement, mystery, and nostalgia for everyday landscapes. My work is primarily comprised of oil paintings depicting suburban night scenes. The lighting is colorful and intense, like it's coming through the canvas. It was even regarded to having a glow from within. My paintings are referenced by my own photography and my members experiencing the location. The paintings in the 2x2 exhibition are based in different areas, such as Lambertville, New Jersey, Doylestown, Pennsylvania, and Providence, Rhode Island. despite looking like they come from a similar location. I really appreciate Mike and Tina for having me for the 2x2 exhibition, and hope you can check it out and see the available works up until December 24th.
So there's Martha. And we'll just show you her paintings here. All right, so that's Martha's work. And then next is going to be R.A. Friedman. Hello, R.A.
Hey, welcome.
And these are your photographs.
Yes, thank you for inviting me, and thank you everyone for being here and bearing with me while I talk about these. I'll be brief. I usually work in series. My background is in painting and drawing, but I've been doing photography, or I was doing photography from about 2011 to 2014. These were really an exercise in walking the landscape of Philadelphia. Pretty much the rule was any distance that I could go that was within walking distance of the house. I live at about 22nd and South. So lots of long walks, and frequently in very cold weather with the camera, walking around Philadelphia, and really trying to kind of make the street my studio. And I worked on these from about 2011 to about 2014, 2015, when the project just kind of reached an endpoint. And the real reason that it did is that most of the things that I really enjoyed photographing, that really felt meaningful to me, that were sort of the more marginal things in the Philadelphia landscape that were kind of hanging on by a thread, really started to disappear. And it almost became kind of an insider joke that anything I photographed, you could be sure within a month it would be gone. And that often was the case, that things that I photographed, I would come back, and I often revisited places where I photographed, that what I had shot was just no longer there. From this, I kind of moved on to kind of returning back to my first love of the figure. So I actually did a whole series of pinhole photographs, which with a nude figure, which kind of became a precursor to what I'm working on now. I think it has something to do with number 45 coming into office around 2017. I really felt the photography just kind of couldn't hold all the kind of seething emotion that I was feeling. So I actually started drawing again, something that I hadn't really done with any kind of intensity or focus for quite some time, and really decided that I was going to knuckle down and really learn how to draw the figure. So I started drawing from photographs, anatomy books, occasionally drawing from life when I can, which I still continue to do. And so right now I'm kind of gearing up, as I kind of quipped at the beginning, but it was less a quip than the truth, is that I really do want to kind of move back into really painting the figure, which is really what I did in graduate school. But I felt like I never really had the sort of the technical background to really do it. And now I'm just finally starting to realize some things that I really wanted to do almost over 30 years ago. So the things that I do tend to have a kind of long arc. I'm also kind of reconsidering photography right now. A lot of these were shot on film. I'm really starting to think about the whole sort of question of romance and romanticism, especially in photography, and its kind of Janus-faced nature. It's both its kind of destructive nature and also its kind of sort of the energy and creativity that it generates as well. And I think that, you know, film photography, sort of its rebirth, has a lot more to do with its romance than what the medium can actually do. So I think it's kind of an interesting thing to be considering right now, with supply chain issues and the price of film really going through the roof. So it's kind of where I stand at this point. These were done from around 2011 to 2014. A lot of them were shot after work, just to kind of ease out and just really just take a long walk until the light really would kind of fade away, and then come home and sort of feel like even if the photography wasn't great that day, that somehow at least I got in some exercise. That about covers it.
Thank you, Ari.
Thanks, Michael.
So next we have Alexander Cheves. And Al lives in Oakland, California, but he can't be with us tonight. Al and I went to school together at the Pennsylvania Academy in the MFA program back in '94 to '96. And he paints and makes sculpture. All right, so that's everyone. We will end it here then. So as I said before, you can visit the show through December 24th, Wednesday through Friday, 10 to 6, 12 to 6 on Saturday and Sunday are our hours. And you can also check everything out on the website. So I'd like to thank all the artists for participating, and thank everyone for joining us tonight as well.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Michael.
everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Great work.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Great.
Nice
Good night.
meeting all of you.